Hello, and welcome to Nomadic Diaries, the re-entry series. I'm Doreen Cumberford, the host.
And I'm Linda Mueller, the co-host. Hi, everyone. This is Linda Mueller, and this week we are focusing on creating a vision for your repatriation. As you're going to hear throughout the month, Doreen and I really think that repatriation can be as fulfilling and meaningful as your life abroad. And I know it might be hard to believe, but it's true. And today I'm thrilled to have award-winning international photographer Tanja Pleis join us to discuss how she used visioning as a bridge between her life abroad and her life back home. Hi, Tanja.
Hi, Linda. How are you?
Great. And tell us, where are you sitting today? You're in Germany, but where are you?
Well, I'm in Germany. I'm in a tiny little town close to Bremen. Might be the biggest city. Hamburg is another one, but it's a 2-hour drive in the middle of nowhere here.
Well, I'm sure it's beautiful and peaceful. So tell me, have you gotten used to being called an international photographer yet?
Well, not really, but I'm telling it myself every day.
I love it. The power of thought. Okay, yes. So let me introduce you to our guests before we get started. Tanja Pleis is a portrait and branding photographer with a heart in Chicago and a German soul. She left a promising HR executive position in Hamburg, Germany, to move to meet her partner in Chicago in 2012. And when she first got there, she maintained her corporate career, but she gave birth to a daughter in 2015, I believe. And then she was handed a career break at one point when the local office of the company she was working for closed down. And I'm so inspired by what she chose to do. I mean, first of all, she showed us how brave she was because she had the faith to give up her career and move to Chicago, knowing that she could figure out what she would do next. But then when she was handed this career break, she decided to follow her lifelong passion of photography, and she turned it into a business in 2018. As a mom, a wife, and a passionate advocate for women, she believes that every woman deserves to see her own unique strength and beauty. She captures personal and professional images that empower women to shed self-doubt and embrace their authentic self in images that unveil the extraordinary woman within. And I think that's so beautiful. So I wanted to make sure I captured Tanja's words perfectly to describe what she does. And I will tell you, I've seen Tanja's work. I've seen her in action, and it's really stunning and empowering. And you're going to have to see it for yourself. And we'll tell you how to do that later in the episode. But what's really exciting to me is that as we're recording here in late July, Tanja's in the thick of her repatriation as she just returned to Germany a few months ago. Remind me, time is passing so quickly. Remind me, how long has it been since you moved back to Germany?
End of April. Yeah. April 30th.
So this is our opportunity to learn from someone who's in the thick of it. And before we started recording, Tanja was telling me that she's going through registering for insurance in Germany. So she's truly in the thick of the details right now. But why don't you give us some context? Like, we know, or I know, because I know you personally, that you loved your life in Chicago, like all the cultural events you were always going to, the amazing restaurants. I don't know. Before we jump into it, tell me, like, did I miss any? What are the highlights from your time in Chicago? Is there anything that you want people to know?
Ooh, yeah. I mean, you already said it. I just love Chicago. I love the cultural offerings, the architecture. I will say a lot of my friends are there, connections I have, and then of course my business, which is still there, which is basically my identity. So yes, that is my Chicago life. And the German life is very different.
I can imagine. We'll have to dig into that. And so you're self-employed, you have a family. So you loved Chicago. And why did you decide to move back to Germany? I think that would really help people to understand sort of why you decided to move back and what factors you were considering as you decided and how you decided in the end.
So when I moved to Chicago in 2012, it was supposed to be for a year, maybe two. And we were always supposed to come back to Germany. And then, life happens, right? So, and then it's another year and another year. And then my husband started his business in not Chicago, but the US. I don't know. It was all always, oh, next year we're moving, next year. And it went on for several years, especially when my daughter was born. I always said, oh, I want to move back before she goes to school so that she doesn't have to go through all the transitions and all of that. So, and then we finally transitioned her mid-school year when she was in third grade. So there goes the planning of before she goes to school. And it was really for family reasons only. I don't have any siblings. I'm an only child. My parents are not getting any younger. Same goes for my husband's family. And then I was very close with my grandma. So I wanted for my daughter to grow up as I grew up, like seeing my grandma. But then also, I mean, now we live in this tiny little town here in Germany. So my daughter just rides her bike to school. She tells me, oh, I'm going to the playground, and off she goes. And that is also what I wanted for her. Grow up as I grew up. Just after school, do your homework, and then don't be seen until dinner time. That's possible where we live now.
Right. Oh, that's beautiful. So really, family was the one reason that drove you to do this.
Yeah. Yes.
Okay. And so as you were deciding to go and you have your own business and your husband has his own business, what were the factors that you were considering as you were deciding, like, okay, we've been talking about doing this, but now is the time to actually do it? What were the key factors that you were considering?
We actually sat down, like did a matrix, and we're like, all right, so what are the key factors and how important is it to us? And then turned out, well, family is important to us, school is important to us. So, and those were like the driving factors. And we made the decision and said like, all right, so now we have like actually written down. It wasn't my gut telling me, oh, you got to go back to Germany. It wasn't something I was considering. So, and then we told our families and said, we're coming back. And then when it was time to move, we said like, oh, we don't want to move. I really don't want to move. And that was a little earlier than we actually moved. It was last year. Then we said like, who's leaving Chicago in the summer? That would be stupid to do. So let's wait a little longer. And so we procrastinated slightly. And then we finally said, all right, we got to do it now, because otherwise our daughter will only be in elementary school like for 1 year here in Germany. So that's after the fourth grade, they make the decision how they advance, what school she's going to. And we wanted for her to be in school at least for 1.5 years to have like a proper evaluation. Yeah, and it was just, all right, we said we are moving, so let's do it. Execute the plan.
So it sounds like you had about 1.5 years. You sort of extended your planning.
Well, yes. So we were
planning's not the right word. Maybe it was more like you made the decision and then you knew you were going, but you sort of added another 6 months onto it, perhaps.
Yes. Yeah.
Basically.
But also we didn't do anything in between. It was just, oh, let's not move in the summer. Let's move later. And in between, we were just living our life, but not preparing for the move or doing anything.
Okay. So that's interesting, because when I look at you from the outside, I see that you took a somewhat local business. I know that for your photography business, you had people that would fly in for shoots from different parts of the US on occasion, but it was primarily a Chicago-based in-person business. And now it's an international business where you are serving individual clients, but you also have some corporate clients. Yeah. So that vision for your business seems to have taken root at some point. But what I'm hearing you say is that you didn't necessarily put the same thought into the personal side of your relocation. Is that accurate?
That's 100% accurate. And it even applies to my business a little bit. So I think the reason is I was holding on to Chicago, and I didn't want to plan for the move. I was the one in our family. I think still it's the hardest for me because my business is my identity. My business is in Germany. And I knew I didn't want a corporate job coming back to Germany. So that was not in the books. I also knew the business I have in Chicago is not, so I can't just transfer it to Germany as is, because Germans are very different when it comes to photography. Then this area we live in, people will probably look at me like, what? We don't even understand what you're doing. So, and with that being said, I was the one like really, really holding on to our life in Chicago. I think that is also why I neglected that we are moving. I didn't want to have anything to do with it. But I also knew I had to find a solution for my business. So, and I think, and so we said from the very beginning that we would try to have like a hybrid life between Germany and Chicago. So otherwise, I think I would not have moved. If that was the chapter, Chicago, and then that's the end, I think I would have said, no, let's stay in Chicago. But from the very beginning, it was clear, all right, let's try to make it work. I go back to Chicago for work, travel like at least 3 or 4 times, and then also try to build my business here. So, and that is, yeah, I think that was a plan, and my business is so important to me. So that is why I put a little more thought into that.
Well, and I
Not
think
to
what
say
makes you unique is that most people right away jump into the logistics and they don't think, bigger picture about what do I need to be fulfilled. But you were very clear from the get-go that your business is your passion, and you really needed to find a way to bridge that between your two worlds, so to speak. And so a hybrid life of you keeping your Chicago business going, but also building a business in Europe because your local situation doesn't lend itself to a thriving business like you had in Chicago. But why don't we step back and explain to people what kind of photography you actually do so that they'll understand what you mean when you say the Germans might not embrace it.
Well, I specialize in women portraiture, which means, as you already said, so I do branding and headshots, then also glamour and boudoir photography, and it's like 100% women. And so my brand is She Is. And so my signature offer is She Is Herself. And it's very important to me that women who come to me are not like, it's more than a photo shoot. It is really, it's an experience. It goes much deeper. They're also sharing their stories. And every woman who comes to me is like experiencing some sort of change afterwards, in a good way.
Right. And
we are also inspiring other women by sharing their stories, just showing like, if you're going through this, then you're not alone. And that's what I do. And then especially for the more skin showing images, if you're like in the middle of nowhere where there are mostly farmers and horse breeders, that's not something they used to.
Right. Well, and there's a smaller population, I would assume.
Yeah. And it's also a small town. It's a very typical, stereotypical German neighbors, which are like, just know everything you do.
Right.
And that's very different from like the more anonymous life in Chicago. So that's what I do.
I think the work that you do is beautiful, and it can translate to this international platform. And I know you're in the thick of making that transition, but in what way has having this vision that you want to build for your business helped you with the personal side of the relocation, physically moving your things, setting your daughter up in school and all of that? Like, do you think having this vision for at least the business side of your life has helped you, or has it made it harder in some ways? Or I shouldn't even say and has it made it harder in some ways?
No, it was my anchor. It was really I needed the vision in order to comprehend this move, I guess, and also make it happen and like go with it, because I was so rooted with my business in Chicago. If I had not had the vision of, all right, it'll be Chicago and then also the UK, and then at one point Germany. So the UK is what I'm actually working on right now. It even comes before Germany because it's I'm lucky in that regard because I have someone helping me with social media. Anna, and she's amazing. And she actually went through the same repatriation. So she used to live in Chicago. She's originally from the UK, and she made this move with her business back to the UK. So she knows exactly how it feels and what needs to be done. And now that I'm closer to her, and she is supporting female founders, so that is basically, it like goes hand in hand, and that makes it easier for me. So that's also why UK is easier for me to like build my business in than Germany, because I don't have any like network, any connections here. My friends, everyone who I knew is a 2-hour drive, at least a 2-hour drive away. So yeah, and I've been to the UK twice now, and I will be going back for like some actual shoots, which is exciting in August. So yeah, I really needed this because the first night here in our home in Germany, I was bawling my eyes out. I was like sitting there thinking, this is not right. It doesn't feel right. I lost my identity because I'm Tanja Pleis and I own Tanja Pleis Photography, and I need to be in Chicago to do this. And I really had to switch it in my head in order to make this work, and have the vision, and also think of, well, I'm in the middle of nowhere. What does that mean? How can I make it work? So, and that's something I'm thinking about now. If they don't want to do, or if they don't want to take me up on what I have to offer, so then what is it that I can offer that people would like and maybe travel to me?
You know, it's amazing. Like you've really hit on so many important things. Number one, that you reached out for help and you found someone that's been through a similar experience that can support you professionally. But then I would assume like that has maybe spilled over into your personal life of,
Absolutely.
your
Yes.
personal and your professional life are so entwined. Like how has having this professional support helped you personally?
What helps is just knowing, I mean, others have done it too. You can do it. So you're not the only one moving. You're not the only one leaving maybe a business behind and or like building a second business somewhere else. You're not the only one transitioning a child. I mean, everyone who's moving, even if you're not moving countries, it is as soon as you switch schools or like different neighborhood even, you have the same problems you're dealing with. It might be a little more if you're like, yes, moving countries, but I mean, I'm from here. So it's not that I'm thinking, oh, I don't know. But that was also scary because I was like, I'm not sure if I can deal with the Germans. They were too German for me. And I'm probably now too Americanized, especially for this area. But that worked out too. And I think it is really, it's mindset. I mean, I can sit here and bawl my eyes out, but that doesn't make it any better. Not for me, not for
a minute. For a minute, just a little release.
Yeah. Yes. And I think it is okay to grieve. And that is what I was doing when I locked my studio in Chicago for the last time. That was rough. Then coming here, I will say I wasn't in the bad mood, in the best mood. Whenever my parents were super happy, and I was sitting there thinking, "What are you so happy about?" That's so unfair, of course, but that is what I was feeling. And everyone was like, "Oh, you're back." It's like, "Yes, we're back." And it's okay to feel that, I think. But then at one point, with everything, you just got to move on.
Right. Well, I appreciate you being honest about what you're experiencing. And, you know, again, you're in the thick of it because it's only been a few months. You're still sorting things out on the ground and putting your vision in place for your business. So, but I do appreciate your honesty with, you know, what you're experiencing. And I also hear you saying that you're really aware. You're like, I'm grieving, and you're allowing yourself to grieve, which is so healthy, and versus squashing it down. It's like, you're in reverse culture shock right now. You're mentioning that you're not sure if you fit in. Like, in what ways do you see that you have changed? And have you noticed any changes with the people in the place of your quote unquote home or passport country that are impacting how you see your current situation?
I will say that I actually noticed it more when we were visiting Germany. Because then we would go back to Hamburg, where I used to live before I moved to Chicago. So, and I think it took me like 3 years to really call Chicago home. Before it was always going back to Hamburg was like, oh, I'm going home. And then after 3 years, it was like, oh, okay, now I'm going home to Chicago. The past years, I noticed, I don't know, and that might sound a little weird because Hamburg is like a bigger city too, but it was also like small world problems. At least I thought it was like small world problems, and that probably sounds a little arrogant, but to me it was, I don't know, very different coming back. And now I don't feel it as much because we're in this tiny little town anyway, and I'm not comparing it to anything. And I think that was also, I mean, we live in the area my parents live in now, and that's why we moved here and not to Hamburg. But I'm actually happy we made this decision because otherwise I would have compared Hamburg to Chicago, every single aspect. And since we're sitting in this tiny little town of, I don't know, like 20,000 people, it's not even possible. It's like there are cows and horse breeders and farmers and tree nurseries, and that's what I have. And it's just not comparable in itself, which is a good thing. Yeah, it's a completely different life.
That's probably, yeah, I can see where that would be really helpful to have it be so different that you can't compare. One of the things that I also heard you talk about was just the fact that you're focused on the positives. What can you do where you are versus I think sometimes people when they repatriate get really stuck on what they can't do, what they're missing from the previous place. But it sounds like you're really focusing on, well, this is my current situation. What can I do with it? And so I think your vision, maybe if you would have just focused on the logistics and moved to where you are now and tried to start your business fresh, maybe that wouldn't have been the case. Is that a fair assumption? Like that it helps you having your vision because it's sort of positioned you to look at your current situation differently?
Yes. I mean, I also have to, because to be very honest, I mean, so my husband is self-employed as well. He has his own business. It's a little unfortunate because his business is also based in the US. He's a consultant. So he has to travel like frequently to the US, back to the US. But we also, I mean, I need to make some money in order. I mean, it's not we're sitting here and thinking, oh, that's great, we're close to family and that's it. So, and since I can't, so either I take on a job, I apply for a job and do something I'm not passionate about, which I really don't want to do. And that's my driver to make it work somehow. So, and that was also driver for, all right, so what can I do? Keep my business in the US, go back frequently, and then look at other markets and also other opportunities. So if I'm in the middle of nowhere, maybe I'm hosting retreats here because that is something where it's actually beneficial if you have a lot of greenery and peace and quiet.
Oh, that's great. I love that idea. And like you're even looking outside of traditional photography. So perhaps this move is opening your mind to things that you wouldn't have done if you just stayed in Chicago.
That's very true. I would have been still, or well, like a Chicago portrait photographer. Mm-hmm. And now I'm an international portrait photographer.
And perhaps more someday beyond
maybe
photography.
More someday. Yeah, but that is what yes. So I definitely struggled with the idea of moving back, to be very honest. But then it definitely opened doors. And also the vision board workshop, I mean, I put it on there. I said, all right, I'm seeing myself on the plane going back to Chicago. I'm seeing myself on the plane going to London. And then maybe, because we also all know how like hectic, stressful, noisy Chicago is.
Right.
And so having this, all right, now we have a backyard. I have tomatoes and cucumbers in our backyard, and I'm watering the plants every night. So that's just a different side, and it calms me down a little bit too, which is probably good.
I love hearing that, So what I'm taking from this conversation is you had this anchor of your vision.
Yeah.
And you mentioned a vision boarding tool that helped you lay out what your life could look like over the course of this year and beyond.
Yeah.
And then you've struggled through your repatriation, as most of us do, but you have hope and you're optimistic because you're now experiencing things that while you loved Chicago, you couldn't experience these types of things there.
Yes.
So I think that's really inspiring for those of us that have, been through repatriations or are planning a repatriation and we are lacking hope, perhaps.
Yeah. Yeah.
And there is, for somebody that had a very localized business to now have this vision and to see growth in what she's able to offer the world, I think is very inspiring. And you're also living your values, which, okay, that's a bit of a coachy word, but what's important to you, like you and your husband are clear on what's important to you, and you're finding a way to make that be the center of your life, but you're also still focusing on your other values, which is, I don't want to put words in your mouth, but you're still focusing on your professional career and whatnot, and you're making it all happen.
Yeah, no, and that's true, because it was basically for both of us, my husband and I, thinking, all right, being with family and providing a life for my daughter that I want for her to have also meant that we had to give up something. And that, that's a little bit of a struggle. Putting yourself as a mom and as like a woman, we're used to it. It's like we always do that, right? Putting our needs on the back burner. But as I said, my business was so important to me. So it was okay to do that, but only if I could maintain it or do it in a different way. So yes, it was a little bit of a struggle, but it's also, I think it was a good decision overall to really create the life I'm manifesting in my head.
Right.
I had a very clear vision, still have. It's not like 100% executed yet, but as I said, I see myself on the plane, but I also have a very clear vision of our dream home, which we don't have yet, but that's another thing we're working on. So let's see.
One day at a time.
I know.
Well, and is there anything that you wish, like we could keep talking for hours, but I'm just thinking right now, like, is there anything that you wish you would have known before you made the physical move that could have helped make landing in Germany easier? Or anything you wish you would have done that you didn't do?
Well, yes. That's an easy thing, but my husband thought it would be a good idea so that we would pack up our whole apartment by ourselves. And I said to him, that's not a great idea. Let's not do this. We need help, because I was working till the end, the day before we board the plane. He was working. So in between, we would pack our things and all of that. We were miserable. Of course, that also wasn't the best, because I always said I told you so, and yeah, better. So I think that is something where I knew it, but I said, all right, we just do it. I would never ever do this again, and that's just a tiny part, I think. But yeah, really in the bigger scheme of things, always asking for help. It's so the help I have with my business, the help we had with our move here when we arrived here in Germany was great. But then I don't know, for some reason we thought we don't need this help in Chicago. But yes, it's okay to ask for help, and because when you move, you're going through so many things and emotions, and it's like you have a never-ending to-do list on top of if you like struggle with a move on top of the like emotional aspect. So if you can make your life easier, make your life easier.
Love it. That's a great tip to close out on, to share with our listeners, because I do think so many of us, especially women, are like, I can do this. I can do it all. So asking for help is so important. And, Tanja, here we are. Like I said, we're in very late July. So I think we are, for this series that we have on reentry, we have a Facebook group going called Reentry Rockstars. And I think what we're going to have to do is bring you in live in November to give our listeners an update on how your repatriation is going and where you are in the reverse culture shock curve and whatnot. So I'm going to extend that invitation now. And we'll make sure we make that happen later. So let's see, as we get towards the end here, I just want to make sure we tell people how to find you. Where is the best place for people to find you and how to contact you?
Yes. My website is tanjapleisphotography.com, like one word. It's my first name, last name. And same on Instagram, which is probably where I'm the most active. So yeah, and that's how you can find me, or just send me an email at info@tanjapleisphotography.com. That's always an option too.
Great. And we'll make sure we have all of that in the show notes so that people can easily reach you. And you also have a Facebook group that I think is really fun and inspiring. Where can people find you on Facebook?
So yes, it is. I have a Facebook page, and then the Facebook group, it's an empowerment group for women. And we just share like some stories and some inspiring quotes, and also, of course, some of the beautiful images. And yeah.
Great. Well, thank you for sharing your story and being open and vulnerable about your experience, and also inspiring with what you've done with your repatriation. So we'll look forward to catching up with you again in November.
Yeah.
Thanks, Tanja.
See you then.